Good evening. I'm Yasmin Khatun, your host for this evening. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to today's knowledge discussion organized by Public Relations Society of India, Kolkata chapter. PRSI is a national association of PR practitioners across the country. Our webinar series, which have been continuing from the last week of July, has been vocal about diverse educational and relevant topics and have been loved by our audience in varied social media platforms. Our today's webinar topic is Education, the Way Forward in the New Normal. In the new normal, the education system has seen a paradigm shift. We would know today what exactly does the future hold for us when it comes to education. To discuss this, we have with us Chief Mentor and Managing Trustee of NSHM Knowledge Campus, Mr. Cecil Anthony. Let's watch AV on him.
Cecil Anthony is the Chief Mentor and Managing Trustee at NSHM Knowledge Campus, Kolkata and Durgapur. Cecil Anthony did his engineering and went on to get a splendid break with Steel Authority of India. However, he never stopped learning and aspiring. He always desired to passionately contribute to the education sector. Soon, he forayed into entrepreneurship and got a franchise for NIIT. A decade later, a hotel management institute was set up in 1996 in Durgapur. The success of his first venture at NSHM in Durgapur led to the start of the NSHM Knowledge Campus, Kolkata. Since then, what a splendid and motivational journey has it been for both the NSHM family and Cecil Anthony.
Very early in life, I realized that education is a very important tool. First to empower the self and then to empower the society.
As Cecil Anthony rightly says, education is the knowledge or skill that can empower first the self and then the society.
And as we move forward, we look forward to now becoming a university, and we look forward to bringing cutting-edge technologies in education and education delivery to this part of the country.
I cordially welcome Mr. Cecil Anthony in our virtual platform. In conversation with him tonight will be Mr. Vijay Shankar Dwivedi, AVP Corporate Affairs, Ambuja Neotia Group. I welcome Mr. V.S. Dwivedi in today's session. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Yasmin. Good evening to all those who are here and numbers who are watching us here today in this forum. Well, today's topic I think is relevant for two reasons. One, of course, it is something which is very pertinent, and considering the fact that we are surrounded with a situation, all of us are aware of it. COVID-19, the pandemic, it has set forward new challenges that has affected every realm of our life, and education is one of them. And second, that we have one of the most eligible minds to speak with us today on this issue and how to deal with it. Friends, before I ask Mr. Anthony to take over and share his thoughts, I would like to set the context. Two things again here. One is, of course, all the stakeholders in the process, whether it is the government, the teachers, students, school, all of them, they're all grappling with a solution as to what to do with this new normal. Is learning beyond the classrooms a new normal? How do we grapple with it? And second is the great digital divide that we have, between the haves and the have-nots. There are people with internet access and connectivity, and yet there are people in remote locations who don't have it. How do you bridge this divide? Because ultimately the purpose of education is to create that equitable, inclusive and diverse process. And that is how we succeed in this whole mission. We'll get to hear more of this from Mr. Anthony as he takes over. But also important is like while we do understand, there's a school of thought which says that the old teaching practices are very slow paced, and this lecture in classrooms, they are like outdated and things like those. And then there's a school of thought that says that well, technology is in, it is here to imbibe. We must be driven by that. Yes, technology is the future, of education. But then we must ask ourselves, are we ready for this transition? All the stakeholders I spoke about, are they really, they know their role in terms of how going to provide the support for this smooth transition? And then the set of key challenges that the students and teachers have in this new scenario. There are many more such questions that I'm sure I have, you will have, and we'll have this opportunity of requesting Mr. Anthony for his remarks or his observations on all those. So before we actually jump onto all that, we'll actually request now right from Mr. Anthony to please take over for his opening remarks and also a small presentation that he would like to share with us. And yes, for the viewers at large, please go through this, and then if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to put it here. And time permitting, we'll be very glad to take those questions and look for those answers from Mr. Anthony. So, Mr. Anthony, over to you now.
Thank you, Vijay. I should first thank PRSI, Mr. Mohapatra, and the entire team at PRSI for having invited me on a session, Education in the New Normal. Wonderful to have you hosting this program. I will take a few minutes to just quickly go through a small presentation because to understand the new normal, we need to see what happened in the past. So could I just have the presentation on board, please? So the subject today is education in the new normal. Next one, please. And for the understanding of this future, as Carl Sagan rightly said, we need to look to the past. What happened in the history of education? Could I have the next one, please? So education, if you look at, we had education 1.0, which was, the first known records of education in the pre-British colonization period. Then we had education 2.0, which was more the industrial age, the British colonization period. And then we had education 3.0, probably into that only, the post-British independence period and the IT age which came up. And as we were moving into education 4.0, there came this pandemic and a huge lockdown. So before I get into more details of this, I just want to tell you some stats of the world's population for every 2,000 years, So this is where we were 10,000 BC at 4 million, and today we are at close to 7.7 billion in 2019, because this has impacted the various versions of education which came up. So we started off with education 1.0. Next slide, please. Now, this was the first known records of education, and India was at the forefront then. The Gurukuls of India, the academies in Greece, those were the various forms of education where we used to have very low student-to-teacher ratio. I think Education 4.0 is also going to talk about that. It used to be highly personalized to every student's requirement. It used to be absolutely multidisciplinary in nature, right from politics to warfare to so many things were taught in that environment. We hardly had any technology or the use of mechanics into education then, and we mainly relied on the memory or the knowledge of the person who was imparting this. So the good part was, yes, we had more personalized education, but the fallback was, we were very closely guarded, and it was fundamentally unscalable. So then came education 2.0. Next one, please. And this was, when we had machines coming up. The steam engines, a lot of other forms of engines started coming up. So we had, the one-to-many broadcasting of education which started. It still continues today. And we had the standard assembly line style of curriculum running. So if you remember, the class one, the class two, the class three, it was one complete set of people who were moving from one grade to the other and then to the next. So that kind of assembly line of, education delivery came up, and it was more focused on memorization of information, and it was evaluated periodically through various processes, mainly examination. This also gave birth to what was rote education, and it had absolute limited use of technology. So while it helped us to expand the access of education, it allowed us to take education to more and more people as the population was going up. But we actually lost the core of good education. We actually lost, that exploratory, that analytical, the personalized education. Those were the pitfalls we started creating in education 2.0. And looking at all this and the shift in the universe towards a lot of other things came education 3.0. The next slide, please. So this was a stage when machines started replacing human beings. So repetitive tasks were going into form machines. We had the emergence of the internet, which came up. We had the emergence of the cloud storage, which started coming up, and this was the time when technology started coming into education. Or I wouldn't say completely coming into education. I would say that it started influencing the passage of the knowledge, information, that started influencing that. But this still continued with that memorization of the information. And for the majority of, and I'm talking more from the Indian context, majority of the Indian schools, there was still the uniformity of content, the teaching methodologies, and there was very limited use of technology in education and education delivery. But then this, of course, helped in problem solving, analytical exploration. This started gaining traction. The female primary education, it was never an afterthought now. So people started, the female population of the country started coming into the mainstream education, and we slowly started realizing the value of using technology in education. And while we were in the process of coming from education 3.0 to 4.0, it has been talked about for the last few years now. A lot of thought process which have happened. There came this pandemic. The next slide, please. Now, this pandemic actually interrupted classroom learning across the globe. Some 193 countries, in fact, the later data was, this was the data on 21st April, where 191 countries had closed all their schools, affecting close to 1.5 billion students from pre-primary to tertiary education. And if you look at the pink color, they were localized closures which happened there. The other color, which included India also, and I remember that date very clearly, 16th of March 2020 was when the central government issued a notification saying all education institutes to be closed. I still remember it was then for about 15 days. It's been now more than 6 months. And while a lot of things have opened up, education is still under the lockdown. The next slide, please. This data is also very important to understand because education 4.0 is going to get affected by this. So look at this data on internet access in India. We have about 24% of the Indian households who have this access. On the urban side, we have about 42%, whereas on the rural side, which is about 66% of our population, is only just about 15%. Look at the inequality, so with men it is about 36%, women it is about 16%, and the worst is the students, which have about 12.5%, access in India. And this divide, let us look at it in the country, but the main mobility which is available, the internet which is available, is mainly with a mobile phone in a particular household if you go to a rural place. and that is mainly with a male earning member. Now, when does that child get that internet access? So these were some of the major things which we need to keep in mind as we look at what Education 4.0 is. I would like to look at another data. Can I have the next slide, please? So this was the data on how people have been going outbound. So right from 2015-16 to 2018, we have about 277,000 students who used to go out of the country for education. And suddenly this practically came to a standstill. Whereas, on the other side, we have the entire educational system, which is the primary, pre-primary, the secondary, the college education, which is the graduation, post-graduation, the doctorate, and then of course you have the vocational skill education also, which went in the system. Now, the key takeaway here is what happened to all these outbound students, who were going abroad to study and pursue higher education there. Another example which I wanted to give before I come to 4.0, can I have the next slide, please? I'm sure many of you all would have heard about this boy called Chirag Falor. He was a Pune-based boy who secured 12th rank in the joint entrance main examination. And at the same time, in fact, before that, he had already managed to get into MIT. Now, look at his perception, his statement. So the parameters for IIT admissions were entirely different. So MIT needed complete lengthy application processes, big essays, details of one's personality, background, how do you contribute to the society, what all you have done. All that was the big focus. While for the IITs, the main entrance test was focused on very, very lengthy preparations to get through. So these were the two models to go to premier institutions across the globe. So we need to understand these realities as we move towards 4.0. And I would like to tell you all what were the takeaways or what were the learnings from this COVID-19. Can I have the next slide, please? So the first and foremost was, teachers were really electronically
Sorry.
online format. I still remember some of my faculty members did not take their laptops home when they left on that Saturday, which was, I think, 14th of March, and 16th the lockdown was announced. So we had, things at that end to write to the extent of internet availability at home, to the constraint of how do I do engaging learning on the online model. None of us were ready. I'll share another short experience. So at NSHM, I remember we took an ERP TCS ION about 3.5 years back, and they had a wonderful LMS, the learning management system. For the last 1 year, we've been a lot working on the LMS, how to update the LMS, the content delivery, the transmission of content to the student via the LMS. And the last 1 year has been really, trying to change the mindset of people, pushing them to get to the LMS. With the results were pretty low then, and there comes this pandemic, and everything got changed overnight. So these were the constraints which the teachers had. Yes, there were constraints of opportunities. There were constraints of stable and affordable internet access in the country. The Amphan also was a big bottleneck in terms of the internet availability. You wouldn't believe, the availability of devices. So everybody does not have a laptop or a desktop at home, just a mobile device, and that was a smaller screen smartphone. For hours to do online learning on that is not an easy activity. It's a pretty stressful activity for the student and for the teacher. Think of that teacher who's there in rural India, where the teacher is taking a class, trying to take a class on an online model through a smartphone. Those were the challenges. Yes, COVID-19 also gave us the opportunity to get rid of maybe outdated methods of learning. And then we had, working to reduce intellectual leakage. That opportunity suddenly came up because we had this people who are going abroad to study. So suddenly, external force says, no, maybe you're not allowed to go now, or the environment is not conducive to go now. So that actually gave us an opportunity to say that how can we make available better education delivery, better pedagogy of education in our country itself. Yes, I see this as a big time to revisit our curriculum. The good part is I see that in the last 6 months, universities across, I especially look at Macau, the university to whom we are affiliated with, and a lot of other universities in the country who have very strongly moved towards choice-based curriculum systems. They have moved towards the graduate attributes or the learning outcome, the program outcome-based education. So this suddenly gave an opportunity for people to sit back, think about all this. There was another challenge, when you're learning in private spaces, there is an inequality. So we need to understand whether it's a teacher or a student. A lot of them don't have private spaces at home. All these years, they were learning in public spaces. So you had a proper classroom, a teacher could come to a proper classroom. And now this entire thing moved into the private space. So in a room, there are three children who are living. They don't have a private space to concentrate and focus on that online education. This was also a challenge for the teachers. We live in our spaces are not organized that there are independent spaces for everybody. So there are household chores to be taken care of. There are so many other issues we were addressing during the pandemic, and there was online education. So learning in private spaces, we saw this inequality which came up. And of course, online classes. We did a feedback uh, with our students. From 6,000 responses we got, about 182,000 touch points we got. The feedback was, when can we come back to the campus? Yes, online education is good to it, but it's boring. We can't have 4-6 hours. It's very strenuous. It's creating a lot of mental health issues with not only students but also with teachers. So these were the various things which COVID-19 showed us. Now, with this learnings in mind, how could Education 4.0 be? Can I have the next slide, please? So this is the way forward, in my opinion, personal opinion, for education in India. This is Education 4.0 should be the knowledge network where we are putting students, faculty with industry professionals on a same network. And when I say this is a network where knowledge is going to be freely available on the internet. It is already, right? We need to create a knowledge network that we remove the inequality of dissemination of knowledge. And this based knowledge is available to everybody across the spectrum. Now, when I look at this, 4.0, I look at it in four major components and stakeholder perspectives. So let us look at first the equity part of it. So we can make access provided to very high quality curriculum and information for all. It started happening. If you look at during the lockdown, a lot of the online companies, made online education free for students. Coursera was one of the big names which made absolutely free online education for students. So students, everybody across got the opportunity to access this content. The next, in terms of equity, is we need to focus on developing both the right brain. There's too much of focus on the left side. So can we focus more on the right brain, the creative skills right from nursery and pre-KG years? I remember, about a decade back, I met Edward de Bono, the author of the Six Thinking Hats, in London, and he told me two things. I still remember that. He says, Cecil, in India, my suggestion is please try to see that students do not go into a school before the age of 6. You all send your students too early. The second thing which he told me is, there is a lot of no which happens with a student right from its formative time. It's very common parlance. We tell children, "No, you don't do this. Ita corona." So the word "no" becomes more important in a child's mind. If we need to develop creative thinking skills, we need to allow the child to bloom forward. I remember a friend of mine, he's an IIT product. He never sent his children to formal education, no schooling at all. They gave their 10th and their 12th through the open schooling system. They are doing wonderful. They're pretty happy in life. So we need to look at how can we go more towards the right brain. That's very, very important in equity. That's very, very important that there is holistic development of the child. What a child will be good at, what a student will be good at. It's wrong for us to assess that with the same brush. We need different brushes for different categories of people, and we need to allow them. We can't say that a student is assessed only by how much he gets in his maths, physics, chemistry, economics, or things like that. There are so many things which a student can pursue, do, and be really good at. The second part is the teachers and professors. So Education 4.0 is actually going to reshape the role of the teacher. There is such a lot of content available on the internet. Uh, there are so many videos available on YouTube and whatnot, the Quoras of the world, so many things, the Wikipedias. We need to become mentors to the students. That is going to be our role. We need to provide basic education, which is anyway available now, and we need to mentor a child, a student, based on their inherent strengths, skills, positive traits. Teachers and professors need to become tech experts. They have to become technology experts. Gone are those days where we say, oh, I will not embrace this. I will not embrace that. No, we can't. We can't live without that. The same way, 3 decades back, the same thing happened when computers came into our state and our country, where people said, it's going to kill all the jobs and what all is going to happen. And it was special skills required to become, a computer expert. That's the time when I used to do my NIT computer education centers. But now anybody and everybody is so very fluent with computers, mobile phones, other desktop devices, so many options. We need to become tech experts. That's very, very important. We can't have that one size fits all. No, it won't last. Today's world, choice will be there with students. Which faculty to pick up from which institution? That choice will be there with the student. So we need to look at smaller cohorts of students, look at their skills, and look at how can we develop them. That's going to be very important. We have to look at assessing students on not only test scores. That is not the method forward. We need to do continuous evaluation. We need to do very, very creative ways of evaluating students based on their skill sets. Now, as far as the students are concerned, the stakeholders, there's going to be a big shift from test takers to they become problem solvers. So the objective is not to cross a test. The objective is, can I solve a problem? What is the output of the problem? The solution which I gave for the problem, and I'm evaluated more on that. It will be more continuous evaluation rather than end term semester exams and final year exams and things like that. There will be a lot of this word extracurricular. This should get out of the window. This should be part of our curriculum. There is nothing called extra. We need various phases. We need various facets of education. The same way which was there in education 1.0 in our gurukuls also. So we need to look at that. We need to look at how can we see. Let us understand that online education is there to stay. Way forward, it is going to be blended education. And when it is going to be blended education, we will have the liberty of great teachers from across the globe, across the country, taking sessions online for 500 people, 1,000 people together. But at the same time, there will be small cohorts which are created. Some of the the transmission technologies and softwares now allow that the same class is immediately broken into smaller groups of tens, and small cohorts are created, which was never possible in a classroom. If I want to break a classroom into 5 groups, I need to have 5 different spaces to be created. But on the online model, a full class of maybe 60 could be immediately divided into 6 separate groups of 10 each, and then you have mentoring of these 10 groups based on their skill sets, their adaptability levels, their assessment could be different for different traits which they have. One very important thing which is going to happen in 4.0 is the role of the family in education. This was there in our education system before, but what has happened over a period of time, the fast-paced life, everybody in the family are now earning members. So the way we have looked at education is the child is sent to an institution. It could be a school or a college, and then to coaching centers. So the entire that outside third party process is supposed to take care of how your child is shaped. We all realize in this lockdown that the family plays a very important role, and as responsible parents, responsible citizens, we need to take that ownership. That responsibility is ours. You know, think of that child who's just about 4, 5, doing an online class in school. The school is doing an online class because they have to take the academic session forward. There are issues of fees will be paid only if the online education is happening. But can a child actually do a lot of things on the online space? Difficult. The parent also has to mentor, play a role with that child to help that child to learn, adapt, retain, so many other things. And there's so many creative methods now available. So family needs to play a very important role in a student's life. And finally, it is going to be technology and data driven. So leveraging blended learning is going to be the way forward. There is nothing. The best part which this lockdown did was, so pre-lockdown, the physical education institutions and the online were two separate, and they were at loggerheads. I remember when I went to MIT in 2018, they had a huge repertoire of online courses, but none of the online courses were taught in their classrooms. But they a huge bank. So both were at loggerheads. But this lockdown taught us to get married together, to create a blended way forward. I think that's been a blessing in disguise. We need to really utilize the softwares which are available to us. The content creation. We need to look at work contents, engaging content. Just a Zoom session or a Microsoft Teams session where the teacher is sitting on one side, you may or may not see faces on in front. Camera could be off, the microphone could be mute. You don't know whether the student is playing a game on the computer or what. So you need to make the learning experience much more engaging. It's not that learners' fault. We need to create engaging content. Is it going to be quizzes? Is it going to be games? Is it going to be participative activities? Is it going to be smaller group activities? We need to create that environment, because the present form is a stopgap arrangement. Nobody was ready for this. We need a stopgap arrangement, but that time is over. The semesters have started. We need to transform ourselves very strongly for education 4.0. And institutions will be becoming more data driven for their decision making process. We have been using technology more for backend functions, information passage flow functions, but there's such a lot of content, such a lot of data available on the learner in the ecosystem. We need to use tools of AI, ML, so many things available for great education delivery as part of Education 4.0. The next slide, please. I will end my session with this last very important remark, which says, when you have forgotten what you studied for your exam, what remains is education. And as Indians, this is a very, very important thing we need to adhere to. Great, great, Vijay. Now it's all open to
Absolutely,
you.
that's absolutely wonderful. I think that was a great presentation, and I'm sure all our viewers would have really been, very happy with what they could see. There are great insights. What essentially came out also the entire thing was, in terms of the various roles that the stakeholders have to play here, and how technology is going to blend that in terms of how technology is going to play a role in doing it. And of course, while the pandemic has been the greatest disruption in terms of whatever it did, also people have to be adept at learning at looking at these challenges and then finding a way forward. As Mr. Anthony put very wonderfully, is that this typical blended learning, the new concept is blended learning. So how technology plays a role here actually to shift the entire thing from campus to online, and then of course. The whole education structure, from offline to online. These are going to be, the major shapers that we'll get to see how things progress. Sir, with your permission now, I have some few questions, which I think would be very
Sure.
relevant for people who are also watching this program. And I would like to start with the first one. So, doesn't the fact that you mentioned that this pandemic has been a disruption from moving to a level 3 to 4, uh, do you see this as a crisis, a challenge, or as an opportunity?
I see that as a great opportunity. It's a real blessing in disguise. Somewhere, the education world was. Uh, Everybody felt, we are disruption proof. So there could be disruption in the car segment, the taxis, the Oyos and the Ubers could come, or the Airbnbs and the, all that can happen. But education is absolutely, disruption proof. And there it comes and says, here is a disruption, change yourself, look at newer methods. And the biggest advantage, especially for a country like India, is we have been a bit of a laggard in terms of moving up the ladder. This
Right.
is an opportunity for us to leapfrog. We don't have to climb step by step. We can just leapfrog. Technology is openly available. We can just use that as a big opportunity for education delivery, for creating great content, which India has always been good at. A lot of the back-end content has always been created in our country. So it's a great opportunity for all of
Right.
us.
Great. So as we all realize that we are amidst the potentially one of the greatest threats in our lifetime, and as you've been going through your presentation, all of us quite aware that this is a huge crisis, which of course has to be turned into an opportunity. What do you think we should be worried about in this phase of crisis that might have an immediate impact on the children and the youth?
See, the biggest impact, let us look at certain things which have happened. So we used to have about 12 crore midday meals being given in the country. This was the data, I think, about 2019 March. So this was part of food and nutrition for the child also. Now, as the schools closed, this also closed.
Right.
So the biggest challenge now is how do I supplement that? There is already a huge numbers in terms of workforce retrenchment which has happened. Livelihood has become a challenge. So education is going to face a bigger challenge in terms of coming back. We have taken a lot of steps in terms of bringing the mass of the children to the school. That is going to be a big challenge of how do we bring them back into the school education system? How do we stop the exploitation of those children? We need to really work on that. I think that is one very serious challenge for our country. The second thing which I see is this inequality which I talked about because of the digital divide, internet access here not there. So the same way as 2 decades back, we worked on the super highways. The country should really work fast on information superhighways. And that's much faster and easier to do than actually creating brick and mortar roads. So that the internet is available. to anybody and everybody. We need to make that as a mandatory requirement. The same way we used to say roti, kapda, and makan. We need to give this basic technology in the hands of every Indian. And then comes the device. I appreciate some of the mobile companies who were basically data carriers, but today are strongly thinking of, can I get a device of 4,000 rupees or 3,000 rupees or 5,000 rupees to put into the hands of every Indian, because we may have the highway in place, but we don't have the device to use that highway. So this divide is going to be a big thing which the country should work upon. That's going to be a big challenge. Yes, we are also going to have a challenge of, as I talked about, the spaces, private spaces, and they need to be really worked up. And one more important thing, which I think the children of this country and the youth of this country, a huge population, close to 50%, the mental health. This entire lockdown, this way of non-communication, this has taken a lot of toll on the health of the students, on the mental health of even our teachers, parents, so many people. So I think these are the challenges, and we need to really address these challenges.
Right. So it's wonderful. So it's roti, kapda, makan, and internet.
Yeah.
So now this is the new normal that we are settling for. Well,
Yeah.
so that brings me to the second question: is that what lessons did these educational institutions around the country learn from the closure of the institutions?
The biggest learning for all the education institution was change.
Right.
It propelled and told education institutions it is time to change. And I
Right.
think many of us really got back time to think, reflect, and see how or what will be the shape of education institutions tomorrow. Because understand one thing, there is today a challenge in terms of what is going to be the role of an institution and what is going to be the role of a faculty, right?
Right.
And these are big challenges. So this lockdown really taught institutions to open themselves up, embrace technology, marry technology with education, and see how and what could be done to improve good quality, affordable, engaging education delivery to happen. I think
That's
that's the
very
biggest
important.
thing.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, in your presentation, your talk, you were reflecting upon both the old method of teaching practices vis-a-vis the new one where technology is going to play a great role. That brings me to the third question of this particular pandemic, it just transformed the centuries old chalk talk teaching method, to one driven by technology now. And how seriously are students going to be set back by not having classroom teaching for more than 6 months now?
See, one thing which the pandemic taught all of us in education institutions, especially the faculty or team members, we realized one thing, that we remain happy because of the vibrance of the youth in our institutions. We never realize the importance from that perspective. The happiness
Very
which
true.
each one of us gets because that youth is, and it's changing. The age group, say in our campuses, is anything between 18 to 22, 25, and it keeps on moving. So you are always so connected with the youth, and that was the very most important takeaway for us in terms of saying that what did we really miss during this lockdown. Yes, we also, while the chalk and talk uh, definitely is a old style, so-called old style, and we've moved to projection-based PPTs and things like that. But if you look at, the earlier form of online education delivery, whether you talk of Zoom and Teams and Google Meets and all came a bit later, there was no way you could write, right? So you could only speak, or you could share a PowerPoint presentation, or you had to type something and then share it. How do I teach mathematics like that? How do I teach chemistry equation like that? So
Very true.
we started thinking, yes, we need to have a blend. Yes, now a lot of models have started emerging. So yes, it really taught us to move ahead. It really taught us that, I have seen classrooms where the teacher sits on a chair, he or she has written an equation on the board, and the students are sitting. Many of them are on their gadgets. We were not so concerned, as long as the syllabus was getting completed. But today, yes, of course, these used to get reflected on the feedbacks. But today, to keep that student engaged, and the best part is now, everything is recorded. So earlier, if you had to put a camera in a classroom, there would be more questions and eyebrows being raised. But today, all sessions are recorded. So it's not that somebody has to police. It's that we need to make the content much more enriching. So as institutions, I think that is the way forward. We need to create great engines, great learning management systems in the way forward with blended education coming up, and we need to create great quality content.
Right. In fact, you also spoke about this, which we are all aware of, is this great digital divide between people who have access and connectivity vis-a-vis those who don't have, typically in the remote locations, which is actually a huge constraint in terms of trying to make education more equitable and inclusive. And we realize that only a very handful of private schools, have been able to adopt these online teaching methods. And typically, this low-income private and government school counterparts, on the other hand, have completely shut down for not having access to e-learning solutions. This digital divide between students has become very apparent as schools have increasingly turned to online instruction. What can school systems do to address this gap?
See, there are two things which I would suggest on this. Number one is uh, institutions earlier used to look at infrastructure in the campus. So, do we have a bandwidth connectivity, laptops or desktops, laboratories, all that stuff? We now need to move the focus from the institution to the learner. We need to see that what is the infrastructure. If education has to be delivered to a student, we need to look at how the infrastructure is available with the learner. So if you have to make bandwidth available to the learner, the institution should work towards that. If we need to make
Right.
the device available to the learner, the institution should be able to work on that. And the same way, whether you talk of even government schools, so government does a lot of subsidizing the education to in their schools. So they should add this also as a subsidy. That can I provide connectivity, and connectivity also can be monitored connectivity. That it's not that the connectivity is provided, but somebody else is using in the family to see a YouTube and this and that. But we can monitor that connectivity and provide the device to the student. So that's one activity which we should do. Second activity I would say is we should start opening up phase. And I'm not saying that unlock 4, 5, 6 like that. I'm saying that in the earlier classification of red, yellow, and green, the zones which are green, we need to start working in their primary school level, bringing the children to the school, providing the nutrition to them, making that habit back into place. That's going to take time. So we need to start opening up these institutions with norms, social distancing norms, awareness campaign about the pandemic and things like
Of
that.
course.
But we need to start opening up these things phase by phase in various zones. So it should not be all across the country. It's open now. No, it can be phase by phase. Like if you look at class 9, 10, 11, 12, the government just allowed from 21st of September that students who have parents have given permission, they can start coming to the schools. So well,
Yes.
that's a
Yes.
welcoming move, but we will need to look at rural India. That's where the mass of the youth is,
Absolutely.
and we need to get them to these education
Right.
institutions. There is no replication of that. This the society, the student bonding, their exchange of ideas, all that will happen in that because they have challenges at home, right? They need to have a separate space where they can work on education, and that's very important.
True. Very true. In fact, when you were mentioning about this whole transfer currently from the campus to home,
Yeah.
that brings me to a question that, what do you think the parents can do to help with this homeschooling of their children in the current crisis?
See, as I told you in my presentation, also, the parents' role is going to be very, very important in the days to come.
Right.
Online blended education is there to stay. There's a lot of advantage. Look at in the last 6 months at NSHM, the number of international national speakers who have come to share their experiences, half an hour, 1 hour, 10 minutes, has been great. You are exposing people, more and more of the youth, to great people, good experience. So that's the flavor of that online education, and we shouldn't take that away the moment the lockdown is over. No, we need to make a blend of that, right? So we definitely have to make the parent realize that there is going to be a part of education which is going to be at home or in spaces. So the parent has to come back to an old role, which maybe some of the old generations have gone through it, where education was monitored. It's just not parent teacher meeting to be attended. No, giving time to the child, looking at, because ultimately, the society, the family, they play a very important role in the attributes which get imbibed in a child, and they
Right.
need to play a very important role in that. It's time to revisit, reprioritize, and say, I have to take care of the upbringing of my children.
Right.
Father, mother, elders in the family, everyone, brothers, sisters, everyone.
True. In fact, considering the fact that that retaining the attention span of a student is so tough in this online, I think, as you're mentioning in your conversation also, that's very difficult, and therefore one has to be far more creative, engaging, and all that to try and see how you can actually retain the interest of the student on that. Well, how do you think? I mean, what will the teacher's role during this situation to ensure effective learning?
See,
Any thoughts
for
on that?
teachers also, it has been a very stressful time. uh, Physical was always the norm, and it was so easy. When you take a physical session, it could be flipped learning. It could be so many models you experiment with. So it was definitely a big challenge for the teacher to come in front of the same way as you and me are, and be there for so many hours taking sessions. It's very stressful, very difficult, and they were not
Right.
prepared with curated content. So now, of course, a lot of teachers are working on creating engaging content. Content can't be just a one-sided discourse. It'll again become a rote learning model. It has to be, so whatever is going to be discussed, like some of the models are, you upload things onto the LMS, the students can download it. You can send it on a WhatsApp, so many other medium which is available today. So students go through that content and then come to the session. And in these sessions, you have
Right.
quizzes being taken, so that students are, the levels are understood by the teacher, and then get into more tutoring of the students into smaller groups. Use more
Right.
warp content, more engaging content, videos, curated videos. Create your own videos. Like I said, faculty has to have to be now become experts. So they need. There's a lot of software available across. Free software, paid software. We need to use
Right.
that. Quizzes, make games, make debates, online debates, so many things. So the faculty has a very, very important role to reskill, relearn,
Mhm.
unlearn, and come up with a new normal for education delivery.
That's absolutely wonderful. I mean, I think that is the way forward, very simply speaking. In fact, I was just wondering, when you were talking about this way forward with those inputs on the equitable part, and then the parents, the teachers and parents, role in that, the students, and the technology. Now, do you think there is a need for a multi-pronged strategy to manage this crisis and build a resilient Indian education system in the long term? Considering that now we have the NEP, which is the National
Yeah.
Education Policy. I don't know how it is aligned to this, new need, new normal. I'm not sure whether it is. But do you think that, if this is the opportunity to build a very strong Indian education system, then what actually the strategy should cover?
See, fortunately or unfortunately, as I said in my presentation also, in our country, uh, we have been working with a pretty old education policy for decades together.
Absolutely.
It's been the same thing. And the good part is, yes, the new education policy is in place. There have been deliberations going on with new education policy for the last 1 year. I'm sure the fine tuning to be done, keeping the new normal in place. is there to definitely a certain extent, because blended online and a lot of things have been talked about in the policy.
Right.
But the policy is a broader document. What now needs to be actually looked at is the action points which will emanate from that policy. And that can always include the new normal requirements. And as I said before, also for India, it's a wonderful opportunity to leapfrog. The gurukuls of our country were always the greatest places in history.
Yes.
And and if you look at the intellectual manpower across the globe, Indians contribute very, very strongly, right? So there is
Absolutely.
no reason why a reformed education policy. There is a lot of over optimism also in the new education policy. I would really want the government to look at how do we go about implementing them. And if you're able to implement those finer points, actionable points,
Right.
I'm sure in the next there have been a lot of actions also which have started rolling up. If you look at in the medical education, the bill was passed last year in September. Just a few days back, I think 25th of September, the new act came into place, and the Medical Council of India got disbanded. So I'm sure it
Right.
will take about a year for the action points and all that to come in place. But it's a big opportunity for India to attract students worldwide into our country.
Right. Very rightly said, because all of us felt that, this NEP is still in its blueprint form, and perhaps this could be an opportunity to actually, take all these inputs and try and see, what they could incorporate and, probably change it or amend it, let's say.
Sure.
We've been talking about this now. One of the critical components, of this entire education system is also the higher education system. Now, this particular pandemic, it has also significantly disrupted the higher education sector as well, which is a very critical determinant of a country's economic future, because these guys go on to, then shape their own destiny. So, what is your view on that?
See, this has definitely put a setback into the higher education in terms of education delivery. The good quality education to reach to the student online is not the only model. So we need to realize that it was a pandemic. It's a once in a century kind of, hopefully,
Mm,
activity, and
hopefully.
yeah, and nobody was prepared for it. So,
Right.
I was telling my 2020 graduating batches. So we started this virtual graduation ceremony that,
Okay.
50 years down the line, 100 years down the line, people say in 2020, the virtual graduation ceremony started, right?
Right.
So the norms have changed. So we had, the virtual alumni meets, we had virtual
Hmm.
graduation ceremonies. So yes, we have tried to engage the student. A lot of people across have tried to be in touch with their students, inquiring about their mental health, giving them support. People have had so many challenges, even beyond education, giving them support. It has impacted, there's no doubt about it. And the after effects of this impact would definitely come up in the next few quarters, for sure.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
impacted placements also. We have been pretty
Right.
fortunate that majority of our people have still stayed by the offers, but then there is an issue, and yes, the fundamentals are changing. So now we suddenly see there's a lot of requirement for people with certain other skill sets. So we are telling students, can we reskill you and move you towards this? So like hospitality had a challenge. Now we are trying to reskill them. Hospitality is opening up now. Newer things required. So can we use the time to reskill the students so that they are relevant for the new norms in various industries? It has been a
Yeah,
challenging time.
it's a very critical input that you provided. So actually, what actually, according to you, would be the future skills and preparedness, required by students and professionals to meet with this challenge? Yeah.
See, the same way as computer 3 decades back used to be another subject. Now it
Yeah.
is an
True.
subject. Right? So if you look at data science, AI, ML, this is going to be part and parcel of everything what you study. Technology is going to be part of anything and everything what you do, right from medical to law, to engineering. It has always been much more everywhere, even to creative pursuits, visual arts, and so many other things.
Right.
So that is there to stay. There is no second thought about it. So some of this kind of skills are going to be permanently required. So
Mm-hmm.
the youth of the country should prepare themselves with these skills for sure. And then, of course, the newer skill sets. So there's a lot of scope coming up with content now across the globe, whether it is
Right.
education or it is entertainment or it is so many other areas, curated content. So those are going to be the driving, careers and skills which will be required for the future.
Right. So now, one of these things that we've been hearing about is like, the moment this physical space gets replaced by the digital space, typically in higher education, all that, you have all these labs and all there, students get a very in-depth understanding of, various activities and all. How will future research or post-grad studies happen, which are pretty lab-oriented?
That has been the biggest challenge in the 6 months. So while you could take the so-called theoretical sessions or more engaging sessions, you could even conduct flipped learning projects and things like that. But there are certain skills which are very practical oriented. When you look at work, the kinesthetic part of it, you need to
Mm-hmm.
use your hands, other senses to do experiments. There is hardly content available digitally presently in the globe. You have a lot of YouTube videos, but they don't simulate a lot of
Right.
situations.
Right.
And then everything cannot be simulated easily also. I'm sure a few decades later that could also be there in place, but we need those labs to do research. Then that's why, as part of this Unlock 4 from 21st September, the government started allowing postgraduate students with laboratory activities to start coming back to the campuses because experiments have to be done. They need to learn. In the meantime, yes, there will be more, digital content getting created where you simulate so many situations. I have the ability that I will put this amount of a chemical into something virtually. What will be the reaction to it? I add something. So there's a lot of work which is going to happen. AR, VR, all those reality, augmented reality activities, they will definitely play a very, very important role in some of these
Right.
things. And I'm sure that, see, you can't, the same way if you look at the online marketplace, so while you have all the online shopping and all happening, but it doesn't stop the brick and mortars also to work. So there's going to be a blender.
Right.
The social spaces, the various learning which happens on campus corridors,
Mm-hmm.
outside the campus gate, in the tea shops, so many places. Life is all about learning, and it happens in
Absolutely.
where all.
Right. So now, with all these challenges that we are confronted with, including some of the ones that you mentioned in the conversation, subsequently the ones that we've been talking about all this while, it seems that of all the stakeholders, I think one of the biggest stakeholder, which is the government, has a very great role to play here. What do you think the government's role could be in this education sector, given this new normal?
So first and foremost is the information superhighway. That's the first and foremost thing. It is not only for education, but for so many other things. The government is already working on it. Across the globe, even the private sectors are working very vigorously in terms of putting microsatellites, various methods of allowing the communication to happen. So I think that should be the biggest focus. Second is how can we take the device in the hands of the learner, especially the learner who needs it. So these are two things which I think the government should really work, apart from giving a real big jump, leapfrog into the new space of education 4.0.
Mm-hmm. And I think for the interest of our viewers at large, I think they would really want to understand from you again this concept of blended learning. Is it blended learning about a combination of physical and the digital space? Is it about the campus or home? Is it about the online and offline? what exactly blended learning would mean, and how do you think the institutions are going to incorporate this in their curriculum to make sure that they're able to provide a very healthy education to the students at large?
So if you look at learning today, while learning happens in the campuses, learning also happens in the industry, because a lot of students, when I talk of higher education,
Right.
even higher secondary education also started doing this. So a lot of education also happens where students are sent on projects to the industry. They have to work on, team activities in smaller groups, do research, come back and make a presentation of all that. So all that will continue to happen. What is going to get added is another layer of online education. Now, I'll tell you
Right.
in absolute layman's language, that there'll be a teacher. The student will have a choice which teacher to choose. The teacher may take an online class of 500 students, right? And then the class is broken up into smaller cohorts, which are what you call the tutorials. So you have a
Hmm.
very reputed teacher taking the main class, and then there are smaller cohorts which is being tutored by other faculty in smaller groups, so that learning becomes more learner centric. The need of that learner, their skills are different. They are at different levels. If I do an assessment on, various tools, rubrics, and all that which is available, different students are at different levels. So we need to handle them separately. So that online education will be in place. Yes, education will also be that in a classroom, while there could be 30 students there, the same class is also being beamed online, and the balance 30 could be at their home or in any other spaces taking that education. So this is going to
Wonderful.
stay. This is going to get added into the various other forms of education delivery which has been happening.
So you're learning anytime, and that is what it would
Yes,
essentially mean.
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, at
So
your pace,
yeah,
at your time,
yeah.
based on your own, intellectual capacities, capabilities. You will learn at your own pace. It's going to be much more comfortable for the learner of tomorrow.
So what was important to note here is that you emphasize on the fact that the pedagogy and the practice is extremely important, which is student centered, and should not become there should not be too much emphasis on technology and tools and make it teacher oriented. So it's student centered and not teacher centered. That could be
Yeah,
a way
we
forward.
have to
That's quite
become
what
learners.
was right. Wonderful
Learner-centered
thought.
education is the
Right.
way forward. No second thought.
In fact, I didn't realize that we have actually overshot the time by quite a healthy margin. But it has been so wonderful to talk to you. As we talk, we have got a question here, so I'm sure you'll be fine, open to take few questions. I hope the time permits and we're able to handle this. So there's a question from Shomya Shuvradas. Will there
Yeah.
be a problem of access, as the students also need good data for this wonderful
Yeah.
initiative as we are entering next level learning? So if you can take that.
There is, see, this problem is there. Even in a city like Calcutta, we have this problem. Leave aside, the district towns and the rural places, and even mobile companies were not ready for this requirement of data passage. So they are also gearing up. Everybody requires
Right.
time. I think that will get resolved over a period of time. More and more users coming up, and
Right.
we need to focus on how does the learner get the connectivity and the device in their hand.
Right. So great. In fact, we would have been very happy to take few more questions, but it's just that we have overshot the time. And while in any closing remarks that you have, Stanton, before we kind of
Education 4.0 is going to be absolutely, a great time for this country. I'm very sure. It is going to be learner centric, and I said, it is going to be all about that knowledge network, where the students, teachers, and industry professionals, everybody, it's going to be a network of that. And the
right,
biggest advantage which it is going to throw is a lot of this education is going to be free for students. Good quality education is going to be available for students, and so the literacy part of things, knowledge in terms of the width, will become much more easily available to the learners at a fraction of a cost, free at many a time. It is only the depth of the knowledge which is required in certain areas that learners would be more coming to campuses, institutions, research locations, and things like that. But it's going to be a wonderful time. The lockdown has taught us a lot of things. The pandemic has taught us a lot of things. And the best thing everything taught us is to change, because change is the only constant.
Absolutely. Wonderful. So that was great to hear, Mr. Anthony. In fact, it's been a privilege
Thank you.
yeah, it's a privilege to actually, get to know so much insight into all this.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure the
Thank you so
viewers
much.
would have equally enjoyed the entire thing. I'm sure there have been a lot of inputs even for them to take home. On behalf of PRSI, Mr. Anthony, I would really like to thank you for your time and for this
Thank
wonderful
you, India.
insight
Thank you so
into this.
much. Thank you so
I'm
much.
sure all of us have benefited out of this, and we have new thoughts to go ahead with. All those people who are in this particular area and all that, they have some new insights into how to deal with the situation. And for those who could not post your questions, you are most welcome to post them to the email ID provided to you, and I think we'll be more than happy to respond to you. Thank you so much. It's been an
Thank you.
absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Please take care of yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay happy, stay healthy.
Absolutely. I think that's the slogan for everybody. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.